Hello, and welcome to the Hunting Illinois podcast. With us today, we have Dan Stevens and Curtis Twellman.
Hello.
I'm Jason Buckley. So today we're going to be talking about some game safety and how to prepare for the harvest. That's going to be the main topic of today's podcast. But before we get into that, we're going to do some updates and some news referring to hunting and stuff in Illinois right now. So Dan, you have any reminders or dates we need to be concerned with?
Yeah, the
First new
important
update
thing
is check out the new hats.
Oh,
Yeah,
there you go.
yeah.
Yep.
Look out.
upgrading the podcast set, starting to get a little more official.
You'll be able to point us out at events now
Yeah,
too. It's
yeah.
going to be helpful.
But yeah, it's kind of a busy time of the year. Obviously, hunting season is just around the corner. Especially if you're interested in small game hunting, squirrel season starts in a few days. We're recording this on July 27th, and squirrel season opens August 1st. So I'm pretty excited. I know we were kind of chatting this morning a little bit, and I think we're going to try to get out here in the next few days and try to grab some squirrels. It's a little tough this time of year, especially with the warmth and as well as just the number of leaves on trees. But it's certainly a nice way to kind of kick off the hunting season, especially if you're interested in doing a little deer scouting and carry a shotgun with you and try to bag a few squirrels while you're setting up trail cameras or doing anything like that. So that's
a great time to look for the late summer mushrooms, chicken of the woods, hen of the woods, really good time. And once we start getting into late August is usually when squirrels start cutting hickory nuts pretty hard. So if you've got a nice hickory grove, late August, right before dove season can be a great time to get out and go after them.
Yeah, especially if you get a nice kind of break in the warm weather and just get, you don't need cold weather, but at least a couple cool mornings. You can have quite a productive hunt this time of year.
Yeah, and it does seem a little early, but there are a lot of sites, especially up north, that restrict squirrel hunting, even though it's open from August almost through February. But once archery season starts up and even sometime after dove season, squirrel hunting is kind of limited in some spots. So look at your local regs and see what public land you might want to get out on and see if this is actually the squirrel season for it. So right now might be the time to get out.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, up next, if you're interested in applying for the Illinois Recreational Access Program, especially for youth, they have their youth hunting opportunities open right now. The deadline for that is August 10th by 5 p.m. So we'll have a link down in the show notes that directs you to the IRAP link so you can look over the information. But if you're brand new to the IRAP program, even if you're not interested in maybe this youth hunting opportunity that we're currently kind of highlighting, it's a pretty good program. It is hard to beat.
It has the possibility of being like the next step into really helping people get into hunting because they just came out with a video actually describing kind of how awesome this program can be, and it's on the IDNR YouTube page. We link to it on our Facebook page, and it's a family. What was that, Curtis?
Oh, just great video. It's a really well done video.
Yes, very well produced and a great story with it too.
Yeah.
So it's a family where a gentleman got into hunting after years of not really being interested, and his main goal was getting his kids out and go hunting. And he felt the safest and he just felt more comfortable going to an IRAP site. It's your own private land that you have access to for a couple weeks. So throughout the season. So it's a great program.
It's like a timeshare for private land. That's subsidized by the state. So really cool. It's great to have another way to get out in the woods. We don't have a ton of public land, so awesome to try to capitalize on the landowners that are willing to let folks go out there. Take advantage.
Sure.
Yep. And so if you're getting into hunting, and one of the main problems is access, which is a lot of problems for a lot of people, and you don't feel safe quite yet going out on a public land, be it that you're worried about bumping into other hunters, or you're worried about even just the politeness of new hunters and not wanting to ruin someone else's hunt or something like that, you are going to be the only people on this land and you have it to yourself. So it's just a great opportunity. I mean, the DNR really, it's going to be difficult for them to buy up new land. So the fact that they're trying to come at that problem at a different way with this type of program where they can have volunteers put their land into the program is really, I think, a great way of looking at another way of skinning the cat of getting access for hunting in the state.
Definitely. And my wife actually drew an IRAP permit a few years ago. And I mean, basically, just like you described, we had an entire section of 40 acres to ourselves for about 2 weeks. I mean, you can't put a price on that in reality. These days, leases are going through the roof. Obviously, like Curtis mentioned, public land is There's not a ton of it in the state, and this is a great avenue. And the really cool thing about this program is that it's relatively unknown. It's been around for quite a few years now, but there's a lot of hunters that just A, don't know about it, or B, don't really care enough to look into it, especially people who already have decent private land access. But if you're a brand new hunter, you actually get increased odds through this IRAP lottery application. So if you're a brand new hunter, definitely look into the IRAP program. Again, even if it's not for deer hunting, they offer squirrel and upland and turkey and a few waterfowl sites. There's some fishing sites that you can even do. So there's a lot of opportunity out there for kind of increased recreation. So
yeah, and I mean, and they even go down to the youth sites, and they also have a couple sites where you might only be harvesting does.
True.
But again, any type of way that they can talk to a landowner into allowing people on their land, I'm happy for it, for sure.
All right, another kind of big deadline to keep in mind, especially for all you waterfowl hunters. The Illinois DNR did release their blind schedule for the kind of what we call the build a blind. So this is where you kind of build a waterfowl blind. They have released that schedule on their website. You can go through and look at the different dates for those specific waterfowl drawings. Those are in person, and there's kind of a lot of regulations and things you need to follow. But if you're just looking to maybe go out and try waterfowl hunting, I would recommend looking into the public duck and goose lottery application. It currently is not open, but I believe it opens August 16th. Yeah, August 16th. So it's August 16th through the August 31st is that first lottery deadline. And these are really cool sites because a lot of these sites have pre-built blinds, and you're just picking a day, putting your number in a hat, and hopefully you draw a permit and you get that blind for that specific day. And normally, the majority of the blinds, you can normally bring 3 or 4 people with you depending on the specific site. And so it's a really good opportunity to meet new people, but also to get a chance at some waterfowl. So definitely look in that, and link will be in the show notes as well for that.
And just a reminder for the new waterfowl hunters out there, waterfowl hunting in Illinois is really rolling the dice because we're super dependent upon basically a push of migrators, a push of new birds, because the birds are fleeting in Illinois in general. They're here and then they're gone, and the better habitat we have, the longer they stay. But anyway, you might draw a date. You won't know until you get there if it's going to be horrible or it could be the best day of the year if you just so happen to get the day after the big cold front came through on the night, and you're out there throwing out your decoys, just listening to whistling wings. Those are the mornings you definitely remember. So got to put in. You never know if you don't try.
And the good thing is, like I mentioned, you can normally bring 3 or 4 other hunters. Again, every site has a different size blind and different regulations. But if you happen to draw a blind and maybe you're a brand new duck hunter, chances are you can probably find some people that are willing to, hey, I'll bring my decoys and my dog and my calls, and sure, you got the blind, I got the equipment, let's go hunt. And so, even if you don't have somebody in mind, we can certainly help connect you with other waterfowl hunters if that's something you're interested in. So if you come across and you get selected and you have nowhere to go or nowhere to start, reach out and we'd be happy to kind of point you in the right direction.
Yeah, and we
use our Facebook pages for that, like, hey, got 2 people duck hunting, we got room for 2 more. Great way to meet new friends, and like you said, Dan, pool equipment. That's what we did back in college. Everybody had a small number of decoys, and maybe somebody had a dog, maybe somebody had a boat, and between everybody, it's like what was that old cartoon, Captain Planet, right? When our we can make a serviceable waterfowl hunting spread.
When our powers combine.
Yeah.
I mean, like Curtis beat me to it, but yeah, we have that Facebook connections page that you can find. It's the Illinois Learn to Hunt connections, and you have to ask permission to become a member of that. And it's not only new hunters in that page. So if you put up there saying like, hey, I need help and I got a spot, there may be an experienced hunter in there with an experienced dog who's more than happy to get out and get practice in for them and their dog. And I mean, it's hard to get opportunities for them too. I mean, they're in the same lottery, so they'd be happy to help you out. So even if you have no equipment and you feel like you want to get into it, you can find someone.
Yep. And I know Curtis had one more kind of news item to touch on. I'll let you kind of dive into this one.
Yeah, some of you all might have heard, but this is pretty cool. Local Illinois bow fishermen got into a pretty cool harvest on the St. Mary's River in Randolph County, as he found something that was not supposed to be there. He found what is a South American semi-aquatic rodent, actually the largest rodent in the world. And so some of you who have paid attention in biology class probably know what this is now. It was a capybara. And it said the critter weighed between 80 and 90 pounds. And he was out at night bow fishing and apparently saw the animal, snapped a picture or two, and then he took it with his bow fishing equipment. So good to get the, we don't want non-native invasive species out there just roaming around. So we don't know the full story, but we think he probably ID'd it first and then realized that it was the biologically sound thing to do was to dispatch that animal, and he did that. And I hope he's barbecuing the whole thing up for a party, and the Learn to Hunt crew will be waiting for that invite.
Dude,
it's such a wild story.
For those the 90s kids out there, I just remember the first time I ever knew what a capybara was from the wild thornberries.
Oh, nice.
And Nigel was talking about, and I think on that episode they had capybara burgers. I just remember him with the accent saying capybara burger. I don't remember the plot of the show. I just remember that's popped in. I just remember him saying capybara burgers. So I guess they are edible and people like to eat them down there.
That's good.
Hey, I mean, beaver's great. It's a herbivore, semi-aquatic, basically a water cow. What's not to like?
A big water cow.
I'll take a capybara burger.
All right, with that, I think we're through the news updates that we have right now. Any other updates, you can look at our Facebook page. Any type of reminders that we can come up with, we'll post on our Facebook page for sure.
I do want to talk a little bit about an event we have coming up. Kind of missed that.
Sure.
On August 14th, we will be at Chain of Lake State Park, and this is kind of a new event we're trying out. When people come to our workshops and our webinars and things, we often get questions about, hey, why do you have us fill out so many of these surveys? What are these questionnaires for? And a lot of it is to drive our efforts to better assist new hunters as well as existing hunters. And one thing the data has pretty clearly shown is that the ability to practice with equipment is very difficult in Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
Not only are there not a lot of public ranges that you can just go and utilize, a lot of these public ranges may be, just kind of left to their own devices.
Like a mowed grassy area.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or in some cases, the target stands aren't even there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to start a new series of events that's really geared towards practicing with archery equipment. So we're going to set up a little kind of 3D style shoot. We're going to make it tournament style. So you're going to get to really focus on a hunting simulation. We're not trying to just go out and hit 10 pin bullseyes every single time at a target that's 20 feet away. We're going to simulate hunting scenarios, shooting from elevated platforms, shooting through different trees and brush. Maybe you have to be offset a little bit, like you're in a tree stand. Sometimes you might have to shift your weight. And so it's really to kind of simulate these hunting scenarios. So if you're interested in joining us for this kind of first one, again, it's August 14th at Chain of Lake State Park. The event will run roughly from noon to 4, but the way we kind of have it designed is that you'll reserve a time slot. So when you go to the registration page, you could pick a certain time slot that you want to show up and shoot, finish your round, and then we'll kind of tally scores up towards the end and email the winner a nice prize. So it should be a lot of fun. I hope to see some good interest in it, and it's certainly an event. Even if you can't make this one or it's too far of a drive, we do plan on taking this kind of statewide and offering these archery shooting stations quite regularly.
We got a bunch of 3D targets that need to be shot at, so we're happy to provide it. So again, it's free. It's going to be about an hour of your time because you got to get there about a half hour before, and then you shoot about after that. So, and you might win a prize too.
Yeah.
So
and it's a pretty good prize. We're going to kind of keep that as a nice little surprise, but it's a pretty good prize. So.
Yeah. We should point out we'll have a prize for the top male and female shooter.
Yeah.
So hoping to get some ladies out shooting. And then we're also going to randomly select one participant to win the same prize. So even if you don't put up the best score, you still have a chance. And I think this format's going to be super fun because Dan alluded to it, but we've really made it be like a full hunting simulation where if you don't hit the animal in what's marked as the vitals, basically you get a penalty. So it's like a wounded game, and the yardage is going to be unknown to the archers. So you'll have to go through a course set up like a golf course and accurately judge the yardage just with your eye, take a shot within just a few seconds. The whole thing will be timed, and then see what score you get. So it should be super fun. I can't wait.
Yeah. Excuse me, just to clarify a little bit. Now, for this first one, we are recommending vertical bows only, so no crossbows will be allowed. And that's not only, just for the sanctity of the tournament, but more so our 3D targets are not designed for crossbows. Crossbows have a lot of energy, and you have to, get very specialized targets. And we don't currently have those, but we are looking to expand this, especially if it becomes fairly popular, and getting a crossbow set up as well. So for this one, it'll be, bring your own bow, bring your own arrows, but we'll have all the targets set up, and should be a lot of fun.
And that's good to note for anyone who's going out and getting a crossbow. I don't know, a lot of new hunters are. Make sure that the targets that you are getting are rated for crossbows. I had an old block target that I didn't realize wasn't. And I went from an old crossbow that did not have the penetrating power as the new one. And luckily it did stop when I shot it,
yeah.
But man, was it buried in there.
Yeah.
So it's a thing. They're not just saying that on the shelf to make you buy a different target.
Right.
So with that, I think we're going to get into the main topic of the day. Go ahead, Curtis.
Well, I was just going to say most 3D targets, at least like all the ones we looked at, they weren't rated for crossbows.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they're out there, but yeah, definitely check on that, because you don't want to shoot and then see a hole but no arrow.
Right. Yeah, we might just have to do something, a block setup with the targets for the crossbows. I think they're kind of the more dense foam.
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, so now we're going to go into preparing for the harvest, which is stuff that we've been hitting on. I've actually gone back and listened to other podcasts, and this does come up ever since we talked to Chuck Stites. We've always kind of come back to this. I think we even talked about this last podcast that we put out, which was the out-of-state hunts. I heard that at the end of that, we were talking about preparing for the harvest again. So again, this is the idea that we spend all this time and effort and money on equipment and scouting and getting out and harvesting the animal. And then once we have it harvested, we either don't have sharp knives or some type of cool down method or a plan on what to do with the harvest after we get it. So Chuck was telling us that he had all these horror stories of getting these deer back that were covered in mud or not cut up in a clean way, or just
people rushing through it.
Yeah. So he's like, there's clear evidence that people aren't planning, and we just want to focus on that and make sure that people are. Especially as you get into this, you want to make sure that you don't want to damage your meat or have it taste funky or that gamey taste. All rolls up into having a nice, clean style of preparing your harvest. So what are some of the steps that people might want to take in planning before they even leave the house? Like what type of stuff should they be having in their truck or car? I have a little SUV.
A trunk.
Yeah, for years of Ford Focus. So what type of stuff should people be kind of preparing for?
Yeah, I think for me, I'll kind of start the conversation off a little bit more, let's say, abstract.
Okay.
I know, me personally, and certainly, there's some macho kind of quote unquote manliness to harvesting animals, but there is some real, mental decisions that you need to come to grips with in your own mind. You need to prepare not only the equipment and the plan like you discussed for storing and packaging, but you also got to be prepared mentally for the harvest. It is a very euphoric experience if you've never taken the life of something, especially in a hunting scenario where you may have been sitting in a tree stand for 40 hours combined waiting for this one opportunity, and that opportunity finally comes and you make a perfect shot. The emotions will take over.
Yeah.
Let's just be real with that. The emotions will take over. I'm not saying, you'll bawl your eyes out, but you will be euphoric. There will be adrenaline. Chances are that you've probably never experienced or haven't experienced in a long time.
Yeah.
I still get really shaky immediately after a harvest, because again, it means something to me. You put a lot of time and energy into this, into hunting, but also into preparing so that I can make that harvest as humanely and as ethical as possible. And so there are some real mental, decisions and tribulations that you kind of need to come to grips with before you even pull that trigger. So just kind of be thinking of that mental framework, at least prior to going hunting, is, hey, I'm going to be taking a life here. How will I handle that? And just kind of try to do your best to get prepared for that. And I think just that, getting into that mental framework of that, the harvest, I think a lot of these things just kind of naturally fall into place. But one of my biggest, and you kind of brought up, is planning. I've taken, many new hunters who are really excited and eager. And then I'm like, well, what are you going to do if we happen to shoot a deer today? What's the plan? And there's no plan. Even though we may have talked about it, it's one of those things that is often overlooked, I think, by not even just new hunters, existing hunters. I mean, I've gone out duck hunting before and shot a few ducks. I'm like, oh no, now what? My freezer's full. What am I going to do? And so you just need to prepare these things. So I think the first step is just be mentally prepared for that harvest, be mentally prepared for the hunt, and then develop a plan for yourself. And I know, I think Curtis does too, but I actually have a little checklist that I keep in my hunting pack. And every time I go out, I'll just quickly, it's laminated so I can just quickly, run through it and not ruin it or anything. But it's just got basic stuff on it. Like it comes down to simple things. Water. A lot of people forget about bringing water. Not only to kind of clean up your hands and clean up your knives, but you may need to wash some fecal matter off of the inner part of the deer, and having the ability to just have a jug of water, of potable, drinkable water. Don't use creek water because that can really contaminate the meat. But just little things like that, I think, are very important.
Yeah, basically when hunting season starts, get a couple gallons of water, put it in your truck or car, and leave it there.
Yeah, I bought one of those. The overlanding people with the big off-road Jeeps who go camping. They started selling these nice little water tubs that hold like 10 or 15 gallons of water. They're rugged. I think I found one for like $30 on eBay. I picked one of those up, throw it in my car during hunting season, and I never have to worry about water again.
Yeah, we had that for camping. I remember we had those big, they're like turquoise blue jugs. Yeah. That's great to have too. Yeah, that we don't have to keep going out and getting gallons. And also, I've learned once that the water does evaporate out of gallon jugs after a while. Me and my wife had a couple in the closet, and
weren't a gallon anymore.
Yeah, I looked up. I'm like, oh, must have had a hole in this one, but it was just an empty bottle. But yeah, so bring water with. What else?
First thing, I kind of take a step back.
Okay.
And Curtis is big on this, preparing your freezer. So I'll kind of let Curtis talk about his process of making sure he has the proper freezer space and kind of how he plans on packaging the meat. And kind of we'll kind of follow that step. Make sure you have room in the freezer. Make sure you have a place to store the meat. Then equipment for field dressing, equipment for transporting. Then what to do after. So we'll kind of follow along that approach.
All right. So Curtis is going to say step one, stir fry.
Yeah, step one is cook the heart. For me anyway, but that's one thing that never hits the freezer for me is the heart. Usually the inside tenderloins too. That's a day after cooked up with eggs type of thing. But yeah, and also right before season is a great time to go through your freezer and inventory it and know what you have. Make sure everything's marked. Make sure the oldest stuff is at the top so you use it. And know how much space you have. I mean, if you've only got a tiny amount of space, there's no reason to get 3 deer tags early unless if you know somebody who can take those, because that's what you don't want to do. There's a famous scene from the movie adapted from the book, right, Into the Wild, where the character shoots a moose and then he talks about how it was the most tragic thing of his life because he was not prepared to take care of all that meat, so it all went wasted. And so that's the number one thing. Like, you got to have the space, got to have all the stuff to package it before you even think about going hunting. And one thing I do want to add to the mental preparation that you were talking about, Dan, is I like to also be prepared to keep my motivation up through the season, because to me, one of the biggest things that separates a successful hunter from an unsuccessful hunter is time. And if you're going to spend your time out there, you have to keep your motivations up. And so for me personally, I like to have like a stratified approach of how aggressively I hunt. And that's all. It's more dealing with myself than the animal. It gives me a renewed sense of motivation when I say, okay, now I'm going to bring out the grunt call. Okay, now I'm going to bring out some sense and maybe drag a couple lines to my stand. Little things like that maybe they don't have a huge impact on the hunt most of the time. Sometimes they certainly can, but they have an impact on me, and it makes me go out there longer. It makes me wake up earlier. And that's what directly leads to success, is being out there. So having those things that can keep you in the game, I think is big, and you got to think about it before the season.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good point. And kind of, piggybacking off that just a little bit. Like you said, plan your season out. I know a few years, I'll get very excited August, September. I'll do a ton of scouting. I'll run trail cameras. I'll hit, 5 or 6 different properties trying to find new spots to hunt. And then by Halloween, I have hunted almost, as much as I can, and I'm starting to get a little burnt out. And if anybody knows deer, Halloween is not the time to start getting burnt out.
Mm-hmm.
So now I've kind of taken a step back, and I'll hunt a little bit right when the season kicks off, and then I'll kind of slow it down a little bit, and I'll just try to time my efforts so I don't get burnt out. Because it like Curtis said, keeping that motivation in check can be challenging at times. If you're sitting up there for 5 days in a row and you see 2 deer that are a quarter mile away, it can get pretty discouraging. And so that's a good point, Curtis.
I definitely did that in 2020.
Hunted too hard.
I hunted way too hard. I was out like 3-day weekend type stuff. I mean, where I was getting out as much as I could, and then come November when rut's on, I was like, I think I went out 2 or 3 days in rut, and I was like, I don't even feel like going out anymore. And it was like, and it was peak season, man. And I was like, you got to get out.
And then you're sitting here now, you're like, oh man, I really should have.
I know.
Should have gone.
I know.
It's a grind, waking up early, walking. And that's another thing you got to think about is preparing yourself physically a little bit. Now, obviously hunting in Illinois is not hunting in Alaska, but you go to Alaska, people talk about sheep shape, before season, you got to get in sheep shape, because if you're going to hunt, you got to be up in the mountains ready to hunt for Dall sheep, or you might not have the protein you need for that winter. So, but here in Illinois, you still do. I mean, we all think we're in decent shape until it's time to drag a deer out of the woods, and then you really get tested. So
you're regretting it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I should have eaten that cheeseburger last night.
I know, man. Don't skip leg day, like they say, you know.
Got to start adding in stuff this time of year to get ready for hunting, get ready for that grueling stuff. Or if you're a duck hunter, like walking through the marsh with decoys is incredibly tiring. And even for the upland hunters, walking through tall grass, it works like different muscles in your hips than you normally work. So all of a sudden, after a day walking through the field, you feel like you've got the hips of a 90-year-old.
Yeah, your hip flexors. Yeah, feel it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
you got to start working all that stuff now and really get your body in a little bit of a physical shape to take what's coming too.
Mm-hmm. All right, so to kind of get back on to preparing for the harvest, and so you have the mentality of it, and then having the freezer space for it, make sure that your old stuff's on top, make sure that you eat through a little bit, also checking your bag limits, or your possession limits, I should say.
To make sure,
to make sure that you don't have too much. To talk about this broader than just deer hunting, I mean, I know we're going to kind of be focusing on deer hunting a little bit because that's what you need the most to prepare for compared to other species. But if you're going out waterfowl hunting or squirrel hunting, make sure that you don't have too many in the freezer before you leave. So then what do you have in your car, and then what do you have in your pack? So
I think you're kind of hitting on something that's very important, especially when you brought up the vehicle. I would say what's in my vehicle is not necessarily as important as how I plan to utilize that vehicle. I know everybody wishes they could afford, an $80,000 to $100,000 truck that you could just throw a carcass in the back, drive on home, and be done with it. But for many of us, that's not the reality. I know pretty much all 3 of us here, we don't own trucks.
No.
And we all still hunt pretty much as often as we can, as much as we can, and harvest a lot of our protein that way. So it certainly can be done without having a big pickup truck. But there's a few things to kind of keep in mind. Obviously, one, if you have a friend that has a truck, you're a winner there. So abuse that relationship if you can. Even if, hey, I'll give you a back strap if you just come meet me, pick up this deer, and we take it home.
Yeah.
But if you're just going to use a car, or like you said, an SUV, use a tarp. Keeping a tarp in the trunk to be able to wrap that carcass, just to keep the blood off of your carpet. And not only the blood, but also, I mean, obviously, deer are tick magnets. And the second that carcass dies, the ticks are going to start leaving it. It may not be immediately. It may take an hour or two. Who knows?
Yeah.
But chances are, if you don't wrap that carcass up and you just kind of throw it in your car, not only are you going to get blood all over your car, two, there's a pretty high likelihood you may get some kind of tick infestation. Obviously, we know there's a lot of tick-borne illnesses, one of which creates an allergy to red meat, which as a hunter, that would be pretty life altering.
Alpha gal.
Yeah.
Alpha gal gives you a red meat allergy. Yeah.
Not good stuff. So just kind of taking those specific precautions, using a tarp, making sure it's a big tarp that you can kind of completely cocoon, because obviously you're removing the intestines and the majority of the guts and internal organs. There's going to be a lot of blood. It's just the reality of things. You can't remove the blood from hunting, but being able to use a tarp, wrap it up real nice, can allow you to transport that meat without too many issues.
Yeah, and I mean, and not even the blood's not going to be like leaking all over your car, but like even just like having a little bit on the leg or here and there. I mean, if that leg just brushes against your car, and then you got a whole smear, and then your wife comes out the next day and see, but it's rough. But so definitely have that. One thing that you can look into for ticks in cars is you can treat your fabric in your cars with permethrin.
Don't if you have cats.
Don't if you have cats. Yeah, follow the label. Cats are it's very poisonous to cats, but if you spray it and then let it dry, then it's pretty safe to be around. So.
And what I do instead of spraying the carpet is I'll just treat the tarp that I'm going to use.
Yeah.
So at the beginning of the year, I normally always treat my camo and my boots anyway with it. I'll go ahead and just kind of quickly spray that tarp, let it dry, and then I should be good for the whole season.
I know. I wish we had a video of, we had an opportunity to make a viral video. We went over to a site to shoot some footage earlier this summer, and Adam had permethrin, we did not, and we were flicking off 10 ticks every other step.
I bet we had hundreds of ticks
by the end of that walk. Yeah, it was insane. I've never seen ticks that infested before, and Adam had like 3, and they were barely hanging on.
And they were just crawling. Yeah.
So it definitely works.
It works.
So check that out. But okay, so tarp, water in the car, tarp in the car. What about any type of coolers or cool down methods that you might leave in the car, or have you guys ever planned anything like that before?
We do need to also add, you got to think about that trip with the animal. How hot is it, right? Like you can't, when we're talking about putting an animal in a tarp in a trunk, that's for a short trip, or when it's below 40 degrees, because the trunk can get really warm. So if you have to drive a couple hours and it's 50, 60 degrees outside, that's when you're going to want like a cooler and quarter that animal up and get it cooled down, because you don't want to drive with anything wrapped up in a hot trunk. So just want to throw that out there, just since we need to make that clear, especially early season. Always have a cooler I like to have frozen like 2-liter bottles of ice in there, because they last a long time, and as they melt, there's no water in the bottom of your cooler because they stay in the bottle. And then I don't have to buy ice every time, and I'm always prepared. I just keep switching that bottle out.
And they fit really nice inside the chest cavity of a deer too.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. Then when you're done, just recycle them. At the recycling line, they might wonder what that reddish brown goo is on the outside of the bottle, but I'm sure they wash them before they fill it back up.
But no, that's a great idea. In the past, what I've done is I've put a deer on a tarp and then stopped. There's always a gas station near where we're hunting at. So I usually grab ice and chuck that in the cavity. So that's kind of the method that I've used in the past. For other game species, you might put them in a cooler, and it's easy to do that.
And I should say, you don't have to put the carcass inside the trunk. There are luggage racks that you can mount for your hitch. You can certainly do that if that's something you're interested in doing. So you don't have to even get it inside the vehicle. You can use one of those luggage racks that people have used for decades for transporting deer, and they work quite well.
Yep, just have a plan.
You definitely want to wrap it in a tarp, because you don't want like road grime thrown on that animal, because that would be really gross.
Yeah, there's antifreeze, oil, all the salts. Not good.
So then I think that kind of covers up what's in a car. Do you guys have anything else in a car that you might have? I think that's about it.
No, I like to keep a nice light. I know we'll kind of get into this a little bit when we get into kind of the field dressing type preparation, but even having a very robust light, I found one that again is for these overlanders. They just have a ton of cool gear that's fun to play with. But I found this little like 1,000 lumen, I don't know, it's probably the size of my phone or something, that has a big magnetic base that you can just stick to the side of the car. It plugs in directly to a cigarette outlet. And then now anywhere I am, I have this really big light source that I can just immediately move around the car and cool. use. And so, something in addition to having a nice headlamp when you're out actually processing, just having a nice way to really light up the area when you get back to the car. So you can, look for fecal matter inside the cavity still, or really anything you need to look for. It's really nice to have a big bright light.
That's a good point. A lot of this, if you're shooting anything in the afternoon, you're going to be doing a lot of this in the dark. Yeah.
Yeah, and you need a light that's hands free.
Yes.
So whether it's magnetic, a headlamp, or maybe you got a buddy to hold a light, but remember, you're going to need both your hands to do the field dressing. So
and don't think you can hold a mag light in your mouth for 20 minutes while you're field dressing. I know when I first started hunting, I was like, I don't need a headlamp.
Yeah.
Put it in my mouth and I'll hold. No.
For some reason, I felt like headlamp technology wasn't big in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
But I definitely had a little baby flashlight that I would take out and definitely did I've climbed tree stands with a light in my mouth before, for sure.
Just as a general rule, when you're field dressing, skinning animals, probably not a good idea to be putting stuff in and out of
No, exactly.
Not good.
Yeah. 15-year-old me thought it was a great idea.
Yeah.
I'm gonna save some money.
Yeah. I mean, you do a lot of stuff when you're 15 that you probably shouldn't.
Yeah.
So then, all right. So then, heading out in the field, you got a fanny pack, you got a backpack. What are you taking with you?
Good question. I think another thing I want to kind of talk about is what I leave in the vehicle. Obviously, I'm going to take all my hunting type stuff to where I'm hunting.
Oh, okay.
But in my vehicle, in addition to that nice big light source, water, paper towels, I'll often bring a trash bag just to have. You never know. A deer cart. Again, you don't always have to have a deer cart. For me, it really depends where I'm hunting. If I'm in an area that I'm going to have to walk a mile and I'm after a specific big buck, I'm probably going to bring the deer cart and leave it in the car just in case I happen to harvest, a 230-pound deer. That'll wear you out, like Curtis said. I'm not the fittest guy in the world,
dude,
but
75-pound deer, I'm putting it on a cart.
Yeah. and so even if you don't buy a cart, look into it, or even sleds. Sleds work really well, especially if it's a wet day or a snowy day. You can just throw a deer in a cart, pull that thing right on top of the snow, no problem. So I often have some kind of system to assist me getting that carcass back, whether it's a full-blown deer cart, a sled, or even just sometimes if I'm hunting on the ground, I'll take my tree stand harness and put it on, and then instead of where it kind of attaches to the tree, I'll tie it to the carcass. And then instead of using arms the whole way of pulling that, I'm just using my whole upper body and just kind of walking forward.
Sure.
So there's different ways to kind of transport that carcass back, but that's definitely something that's worth preparing for. Is how you're going to get that carcass out. There's even instances where you may be in a valley. I've passed on deer because I was like, there is no way. I'm alone. I'm outside of cell phone service. I'm here by myself. There's no way I can get that carcass out. So I just don't hunt there or pass on the shot opportunity. It happens, but that's part of preparing for the harvest. So
no, absolutely.
I should say that sleds also work when there's not snow on the ground. I mean, it's not as easy as a deer.
Right.
You can even get those like the full body, the 6-foot sleds that are just for kids in the snow. Now they're cheap plastic, so they don't last very long. But if you're only going to use it a couple times, you can find them at Walmart on clearance for like $10. And like you said, Dan, put more rope on it, so you're pulling that with your chest. And even in the dry ground, it's easier on the sled, and also the animal stays cleaner.
Sure.
Walk out too.
Yeah, I was going to say, Curtis hit on it just then, but it serves two purposes. One, it saves you and keeps your heart safe from collapsing, but also it keeps the animal cleaner as well. So it does twofold.
Professional, so that's not that.
Yeah, it happens, man. There's usually a person a year if you keep an eye on the outdoor stuff. That if you're gonna, there's a lot of different types of hunting accidents. One's going to be exertion from pulling a deer out of the woods.
It's strenuous. It really is.
So you got to be careful.
And oftentimes, like Curtis was talking about earlier, if it's warm, you are kind of on a time crunch. And so you don't want to have to, walk 30 yards, catch your breath for a few minutes. Then it's going to take a long time. And if it's warm, you need to get that carcass done pretty quick.
Yep. And looking at deer carts too, I found this out as well. You do get what you pay for. You can break an axle on one of those things pretty easily on the cheaper side. So if you're able to, look to see if you can invest in a nicer one. All right, so deer carts. Again, anything else in the car?
No, I think that's pretty much
Yeah, you're gonna find out. I mean, if you got a climbing tree stand in your car, you got a cooler in your car, you got a deer cart in your car. I have a 09 Ford Escape, and it's about as much as it can take right now.
I have one of those little crossover. Can't be an SUV, can't be a car, can't decide what it wants to be. Mine is chock full. Come on, season, it's just.
Okay, so I got a fanny pack. I'm gonna go out. I'm gonna have again water with me to drink, but if I have any water left over, I'll definitely use that while I'm out there in the field. If I don't want to bring that water with me, they're like the gallon-sized water out. So I'm gonna have a little bit of water with me. I'm gonna have Adam turned me on to gut and gloves. I honestly, again, we talk about the manly thing to do, and I never used gut and gloves before. I used them last year, and I'm never not going to use them again. I mean, it makes no sense. Yeah. They're very cheap. You can get them at different farm and fleet stores or anything like that, and they come in packs of multiples, I think. And what they are, if you've never seen them before, they're like an orange long glove that goes up to at least your elbow, and then your regular like doctor gloves that you put on, and so that way they're tighter to your hand. And it was awesome compared to going in there barehanded.
Yeah, it takes 5 seconds to clean up. You just done, instead of having to sit there with a bottle of water, having your friend hold it, or trying to do it with one hand and you're holding your armpit, and it just never works out.
And then you're going to want a sharp knife and a knife sharpener too. Yeah, the sharper the better for sure. I mean, you never see anyone cuss as much as you could if you have a dull knife in the field trying to cut up a deer or any other game that you might have. But so yes,
sharp knife is safer than a dull knife. Most people get injured with a dull knife, and there is a famous saying, I can't remember who it's attributed to, but if you have 2 hours to chop down a tree, spend an hour and a half sharpening your axe, and that's true with your knives as well. So don't go out there with a dull knife. They should be sharp when you go, and sharpen them whenever they need to be sharpened.
And I know in a lot of cases, we try to focus on the more frugal side of things, like, oh, you don't need the most expensive camo or the most expensive bow. Knives are one thing I don't recommend totally cheaping out on. I mean, you don't have to go get a $300 custom, Damascus steel knife or anything, but at least get a high quality blade that's going to last, especially if you're skinning. When you hit bone or you hit hair and cut through hair, that's going to dull your knife extremely quickly. And the cheaper that blade is, the more constantly you're going to have to be refreshing it on your knife sharpening system out in the field. And your hands are going to be bloody, and there's a lot of opportunity there for things to slip. So I recommend trying to get a pretty decent quality, $30 to $50, you're going to be in a good place. The classic are going to be your buck knives. The buck 110 is kind of the one that most hunters probably start with. I know that's still what I carry. It's a fantastic knife. Just try to get one that has a decent steel quality that's not going to just instantly dull within the first cut you make.
And if you're using that knife for your field dressing, you want to add in that you want to make sure it's full tang, and it's a solid, not a foldable knife. Because if you're using that to break through the rib cage, the sternum, and then potentially open up the pelvis too, which you can do with a standard knife, as long as it's heavy duty, you can tap it right through the pelvis. But yeah, you never want to do that with a folding knife or with a knife that's not full tang, because it will break, and that's again very dangerous.
You want to quick over what full tang actually, what that means?
Yeah, that's just the same steel from the blade extends all the way through the handle.
So it essentially, this is obviously a folding blade that folds. If it was a full tang knife, that blade would be one solid piece of metal that runs all the way from the tip all the way down. Sometimes you'll have a half tang or a 3/4 tang, but ideally what you're looking for is kind of that full tang, where that individual blade runs. It's just one giant hunk of steel. And often you can kind of tell if you're just looking at a knife by looking at the rivets. And so you can see on this folding knife, there's a few rivets here. If you're looking at a fixed blade that has that full tang, it will have rivets that go all the way down the handle. If the rivets kind of stop here at the top, chances are that's probably not a full tang, because they'll need some kind of rivet here towards the bottom.
There you go. Thank you.
Yeah.
So knives, gloves, water, headlamp. Yep, a solid headlamp with batteries. I've had to track deer before, and my light starts flickering, and that's never good.
Get a couple Ziploc baggies.
I was just about to say,
take the heart. You're probably going to take the liver. You might find some other tidbits in there you want to take.
Some people take the kidneys.
Yep.
To each their own.
And I was testing.
If you're a fisherman or a trapper, you can take the lungs, make good bait there, and then also there's the caul fat, which a lot of aspiring chefs will take to supplement their cooking there, which is the little it's almost like a net of fat that surrounds the viscera, the intestines that you can take off, and then it becomes just like a big sheet, like basically a bed sheet, but it's all fat.
Yeah, they all and everybody says it's really good. I've tried removing it. Every time I try it, I always end up with just a few pieces that I'll kind of be able to at least lay on top of a roast. But a lot of people get the whole thing off and just kind of wrap a roast. Oh,
yeah,
so good.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to that yet. I've been starting to take liver now in the past couple of years, and I started by taking like a small chunk because there's a lot of liver depending on the size of the deer you're getting. So I started with just a little lobe and see if I actually liked it, and it was pretty good. So, and they always say that that's like the natural vitamin, right? So there's so much nutrients packed into a liver that it's good for you. So try it out. Even if you don't like it, it might be good for you anyway.
Also, great fishing bait.
Yeah.
Stays on the hook a lot better.
Yeah, it's tough. You know, you don't have to buy chicken livers from the store, and I think it works better, probably mostly because it stays on the hook better. Those chicken livers have been frozen and thawed.
I normally cast them right off.
Yeah, you just throw it and it's like, oh, man, you don't want to hear the two floomps.
Right.
You're just chumming.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, so then what else might you want?
I think I want to kind of reiterate Curtis's idea of bringing Ziploc bags. It obviously doesn't have to be Ziploc bags. I personally will bring game bags that are kind of canvas material, used out west a lot when they quarter animals and need to break them down and throw them in a pack. Just in case you're in an area, you know, I told a little bit of a story earlier where I might be in an area where I won't harvest a deer because I can't get that carcass out. There are ways around that. If you bring, you know, canvas bags and you bring a big framed backpack, you can quarter that animal out in the field and transport it piece by piece back to your vehicle. That is an option. Now, in Illinois, it's not really the quote unquote normal thing for deer hunters to do. It's very common out west. Again, because in many places they're carrying, you know, a giant moose or elk 3, 4, 5 miles. It helps to break it down.
Yeah.
But there are some specific laws in that you kind of need to keep in mind if you are interested in quartering that animal out in the field. Obviously, first has to be tagged before you start any of this process. Tag it. You need to keep sex or proof of sex. So normally that's one testy that's still attached to the inner thigh if it's a male. And the big distinction between Illinois and a lot of other kind of Western states, you are required to bring every single piece of that animal back. Outside of the normal field dressing, the guts and stuff, you can leave all that. But the skin needs to come back, the rib cage needs to come back, all the bones, the feet, everything. So you do lose a little bit of that, you know, ability where out west, you'll quarter it out. You may even, in some cases, bone out and just leave the bones and just bring the meat back. In Illinois, you're required to bring that every piece of that animal back. Again, aside from those inner entrails and organs that you remove during field dressing.
And that's so the public lands don't end up like a bone. You know, all the guts that you leave out there, those things are cleaned up ASAP. You know, if not by mammalian predators, then it'll be the birds. But those, not a trace will be there just a couple weeks later. But those feet and skulls and, you know, all that, they persist. So the best way to get rid of those is put them right in your garbage, bag them up and put them in your trash once you're done. And there you go.
I like it. Now, the real only other kind of thing that I would say, you know, just to kind of wrap up this whole conversation about preparing for the harvest is a clean working space. I know, you know, not necessarily for deer, especially kind of the field dressing, although obviously you want to try to get it in as clean an area as possible. Don't do it in a mud flat that's full of mud. You know, don't do it inside of a creek. You want to avoid water as much as possible. But particularly for small game or taking that next step where you're quartering out the deer or starting to break down individual quarters, it is imperative to have the cleanliest sanitary station you can to get this process done, because at any point you can start to contaminate that meat and it can start to ruin the integrity and the wholesomeness of it. And so I do highly recommend taking precautions to set up a clean working station if possible. Even if it's you're cleaning squirrels on your truck bed, maybe lay out a little tarp or a bag or something just to give you a nice clean sanitary workspace to kind of work on.
Great.
Yeah.
Anything else to add there, Curtis?
No, I think that's good. You know, just the biggest thing, like Dan said, always be prepared to be successful. It's so easy to just be going through the motions and you haven't seen anything in a long time. But it's like those times when you least expect it is probably the times when you're going to be successful. And so you got to be prepared, otherwise you don't have business being out there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's all about, going out and having a good experience and getting some meat. And if you are ill prepared and you ruin meat, that's going to tarnish your experience. And so now all the reasons why you wanted to go are gone. So very important. And now we're before the season, so now is the time to start thinking about this, you know. Start stocking up on the plastic cling wrap, start stocking up on the freezer paper. You know, don't wait and have to buy all that stuff right when you get an animal, because then it becomes a big expense and a lot of things you have to remember all at once. You know, start piecing it together now, and before you know it, you'll be prepared to handle whatever critter you might get this fall. And it'll be a good experience, and then you'll get to enjoy that food with friends and just all around be good. But it starts now with some planning.
And to kind of aid in your kind of preparing for the harvest, we put together a little checklist that we'll put on our Facebook and Instagram page. So if you're listening to this right after this episode is released, if you head over to our Facebook page or Instagram, you'll kind of see that checklist, and you can kind of save that to your phone. It at least gives you a nice little document to kind of help refine some of these ideas, because I know we talked about quite a bit today.
Yeah. So. No, absolutely. I think that's going to be really helpful for a lot of people.
Helpful for us too. I still refer. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't have it all memorized all the time. I mean, it's easy to forget anything. I mean, and it's a lot. It's a lot to take in. You got to have all your equipment ready, and then also have all this stuff ready as well. So there's a lot of parts to hunting. Who knew?
But I like to wear contacts when I'm hunting, so my glasses don't fog up. And one thing I always have in my car is contact solution. I don't know if you've ever like lost a contact and found it, but like it dries before you can put it in.
Oh yeah.
If you don't have that solution, you're out of luck, because
you're blind.
Yeah, if you use water and put it on your eye, it's like stuck there, adhered, you know, like it's glued on there. So contact solution might get you back in the game, because it's really hard to field dress something. You got the monocular vision.
Yep, that's a good tip. Pro tip. I also bring your glasses with too if you have to. That's always good. I always I never travel without glasses with me. If we're going really far away from home anyway. But awesome. Well, we hope that helped you guys kind of see kind of the amount of effort that it's going to take to kind of understand prepping for the harvest. So and then we'll have that checklist for everybody to kind of run through. So hopefully this all helps you all out. So we did have a trivia question 2 podcasts ago when we talked to Dan Reynolds, and he was from Bass from over in England. We talked to him about lead and lead regulation in England and in America. And the question from that was, when was lead made illegal to use for waterfowl hunting in the U.S.? And the answer to that was in 1991. So we actually talked about that during that episode. So it was kind of like, were you paying attention? So so we've had no lead for waterfowl in America since 91.
My whole life. I was born in 90, so that's cool.
You don't got to flex about how young you are.
A completely unrelated story, after 1991, the percentage of hunters who blame their miss on the shot went up 90%.
That's right. So for this week, keeping it with the topic of preparing for the harvest, if you've listened to any of our conversations with Chuck Stites, I would suggest going back and checking those out, but that's our local deer processor. He's also in charge of the meat sciences here at Illinois, or has been. He might be on his...
He used to be.
Yeah, he's kind of retired now, but it's a fantastic resource for us to have here in Champaign to go over and talk to Chuck and kind of get... He's got
a unique perspective.
Yeah, unique perspective, and it's a wealth of knowledge on this stuff. Like, he truly knows this.
I mean, he's processed thousands and thousands and thousands of meat. He's seen everything.
He's not guessing. He knows what he's talking about. So so check those out. We have some videos with him on our YouTube page, and then also a podcast with him and a Q&A with him as well. So we've definitely used that resource.
And we'll try to get out another episode with him here in the coming weeks or so.
Yeah, they do well. So but something that we've always talked about with him, and the main question is, what temperature does meat start to go bad? When does bacteria start to grow? And that's the question. So if you know it from those resources that I mentioned, that's awesome. If not, Google it up, And
if not, take a guess.
Take a guess. And we'll talk about that next time for the next show. So we appreciate your time, and we'll see you around.
Thanks, everybody.